The morning I slid the flash drive across the coffee shop table to a detective in a rain-dark suit, South Lake Union smelled like citrus cleaner and diesel. The ferry horns moaned through a low ceiling of clouds. Traffic hissed over wet asphalt. My hands shook so hard, the spoon clinked the ceramic twice before I could still it. Detective Ames wrapped the drive in a small evidence bag like it was a bird with a broken wing. "Is this everything?" he asked. I stared at the bag. Inside it was a month of my life. Screen recordings, calendar invites, Slack exports, keycard logs, the audio of a single sentence that still scraped my skin when I replayed it. I had named the main folder Lemon Light because that's what the executive floor always smelled like: overripe lemon and money. "It's enough," I said, though enough is a word you only believe when you're out of options. When I stood to leave, my palms left damp prints on the tabletop. I wiped them with a napkin that smelled like recycled paper and coffee. Across the street, our building's glass facade looked like an aquarium, floors stacked with people in dark suits moving in slick, choreographed lines. On the 22nd floor, my boss's office faced the lake. He liked to say you could see everything from up there if you just learned how to look. 2 hours earlier, he had leaned across his desk, the soft thud of his ring tapping wood, and told me there were 2 ways forward for me at Hale Venture Group. He had called them paths, the way a person names a trap, a choice. "Be smart, Maya," he had said, his voice pitched low, proprietary. "I can carry you the rest of the way, or I can make the ground very uneven." I could still smell his cologne, amber, pepper, something expensive and hungry, stuck in the fabric of my blouse. In the hallway, the printer had lain down another inch of paper, line after line of the pitch deck I'd stayed late to mend. I'd lifted my phone, thumbed record, and told myself that one sentence might be the plank I needed to walk out on and still reach the other side. When Detective Ames pocketed the drive, rain drummed on the awning in a quick, angry tempo. "We'll be in touch," he said. I stepped into the gray, my breath fogging the air, and took the long way back to the building. Every stoplight felt like a dare. Every reflected face in the glass asked the same question: what kind of assistant records her boss? The kind who knows the elevator is about to drop and refuses to be under it when it does. My name is Maya Rivera, 27, a first-generation college graduate from Yakima who learned to make spreadsheets before I learned to make small talk. I moved to Seattle with 2 suitcases, an overfed plant, and the firm belief that hard work was a currency you could always spend. By day, I was the junior executive assistant to Victor Hale, the face and voice of Hale Venture Group, a man who described himself as in the business of acceleration. He wore charcoal suits that never wrinkled, white shirts with cuffs that flashed a tasteful, predatory glint of cufflink. He didn't walk so much as arrive. When he laughed, the room behaved. By night, I went home to a studio apartment that smelled faintly of my downstairs neighbor's curry and the salt of the lake when the wind was right. I meal prepped on Sundays, ran volunteer park on Wednesdays, and called my mom every Friday night while rinsing rice, a ritual that made the week feel buttoned. The job was supposed to be a bridge: 2 years close to power to learn how the machine runs, then business school, then a life with fewer coupon codes. I was good at the work that never makes headlines: pulling flights together when snow trapped Denver, smoothing a calendar so 3 cities fit into 2 days, and reading a 40-page term sheet at 1 a.m. and finding the one number that would have made a founder's promise a noose. My superpower was polite relentlessness. I could get a signature from a man who didn't want to sign, an RSVP from a woman who didn't want to be seen, and a custom keg delivered to a yacht before it left the dock. Victor didn't notice me at first. Or, if he did, he noticed me the way you notice a device that works, only when it doesn't. He had a senior assistant, Elise, with the kind of calm you can fold a week into. She taught me where the better coffee was, who to never surprise, and how to read the weather of the floor by the slope of Victor's shoulders. He was divorced, childless, allergic to cats, and the feeling of waiting. The office air had that expensive lemon scent, like the idea of cleanliness. I learned to wear soft shoes. I learned to hold my breath when doors opened. The first time Victor said my name like it belonged to him was 3 months in. He called me Miss Rivera when he needed something moved, Maya when he needed something bent. He started asking me to sit in on meetings for exposure, to stay late for experience, to fly to San Francisco for proximity. None of it was technically outside my job description. All of it added up to a life that required perfume that outlasted midnight and a second pair of heels in a drawer. My mother's voice on Fridays asked if I was eating enough. I told her I was learning. I told her I was fine. I didn't tell her about the way my heart sped up when the elevator opened on 22 and I saw Victor's silhouette against the lake, a cutout shape that told my body to brace. There was also Jonah, a project manager from another floor who laughed like he'd found a sale, who brought me chai without asking how I took it because he'd watched and learned. He knew the security guard's name and the janitor's daughter's name. He texted me photos of dogs he saw on his run. He said we were all climbing the same mountain, just different footholds. I believed him until I couldn't. If you had asked me then what I loved, I would have said the click of a calendar puzzle solved, the smell of rain on the way up Pine, the way a good sentence can work on a room like a good song. I would not have said control, but that's the truth. I loved what numbers do when you tell them to arrange themselves. I love the illusion that if I labeled the folders right, travel, Dex, Hail Q4, my life would file itself into sense. The truth about power is that you don't know how close you are to it until it thinks you're close enough to get burned. What changes when the man who signs your checks starts signing your name in his head? It started on a Tuesday with a door that didn't close all the way. Victor had asked me to stay late to polish a deck for a fintech founder whose hoodie cost what my rent did. It was 8:47 p.m. The office had that emptied-out hum, the carpet holding the day's footsteps like a cooling pan hold heat. I brought in a marked copy and stopped just inside his office. He was on a call, staring at the lake like it owed him something. "Come in," he mouthed, flicking his fingers. I stepped in. The lemon scent in his office was stronger, as if success needed to be sterilized to keep from spoiling. He ended the call, then leaned back, the leather making a soft animal sound. He glanced at the door. It had bounced and left a slim slice of glass. "Close that," he said. I did. When I turned, he was closer than he'd been a second before. He took the marked deck and set it aside like he was setting aside the reason I was there. "You're efficient, and you're loyal. That combination is rare." He said it the way chefs talk to knives. I nodded, because nodding is the safest movement in a room like that. He smiled, without showing teeth. He went on, "I like to reward rare things. Elevators move slower for most people. I can make yours faster." Something in my chest moved sideways. "I'm here to work," I said. "I know," he said, and his hand brushed my sleeve. Not an accident, not the clumsy bump of colleagues, but the way someone tests a surface for heat. I stepped back. "Do you need anything else for the deck?" I asked, keeping my voice brisk, my face the neutral of a hallway. He watched me step back. His pupils did a slow, satisfied expansion, like a camera adjusting to a new shot. "We'll discuss your raise," he said. "Let's have dinner. Just us. I need my lieutenants aligned." "I'm not your lieutenant," I said. "Not yet," he said. When I left, the hallway air felt colder. I could smell the printer's warm, dusty breath. In the elevator, I watched the numbers descend like they were counting me down to a version of myself I hadn't agreed to be. 2 days later, he joked in a meeting about how I knew how to take dictation, And the few people who laughed at it did it the way you laugh at thunder when you're trying to show you're not scared. Later that week, he stood behind me while I typed and put 2 fingers on the back of my chair, a touch too light to be reported and too heavy to be ignored. Each move was small enough to be explained away, large enough to make the air around me taste like metal. The following Monday, an email arrived from HR. Performance conversation. No context, no metrics, just a time on the calendar that overlapped with a dentist appointment I'd scheduled 6 weeks earlier. I rescheduled the dentist. I brought my bullet points and my numbers and the steady voice I used in storms. HR listened. HR nodded. HR said they'd heard Victor say I had potential, and could I be more of a team player during offsites? When I asked for specifics, they offered words that felt like fog. Attitude, culture, fit. When I left the HR conference room, I saw Victor across the atrium laughing with a man in a navy suit. He looked up and saw me seeing him and touched 2 fingers to his chest like we shared a secret. In my pocket, my phone was hot, my fingers itching to press record, to capture something I could hold up to the light and force into edges. When someone moves the goalposts and tells you it's mentorship, how do you measure your way out? I started noticing the small edits he made to the world. My calendar invites began to appear with titles that read like yoga poses: alignment, vision sync, pathing. They were always after 7. In rooms with soft chairs and doors that kissed shut. Victor started forwarding me, reading at 10:58 p.m., articles about loyalty, PDFs about executive presence, a book excerpt that argued greatness required sacrifice without naming whose. He began to text after midnight. At first it was, "Great job today." Then, "Couldn't do this without you." Then, "Up?" The word glowed on my screen like a burn. I stopped answering anything after 9. The next morning, he'd lean in the doorway to my cubicle with his coffee and say, "You disappeared," like I had failed to follow him through a maze only he could see. Elise, the senior assistant, pressed a cappuccino into my hand one morning and held my gaze 1 beat too long. "Document everything," she said, quiet enough that the milk frother hit it. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew. She lowered her eyes. "You'll know." In the break room, the coffee smelled like scorched almonds. In the bathroom, the lemon scent had a scorched throat. In my chest, my heart learned to press its back to the wall. A week later, my keycard stopped working for the executive kitchen. I stood there, feeling ridiculous, tapping the reader until the light stayed red like a flat line. Victor walked by, paused just a fraction too long to be coincidence, and said, "Ask Elise, she can get you back in." As if the kitchen belonged to me only through the grace of other people. The next day, IT accidentally removed me from a Slack channel where deck was being built. When I asked for access, the request bounced to Victor for approval. The approval took 12 hours and came with a note, "We need to route communications more efficiently, Maya. Don't worry about everything." I worried about everything. I began to take slow screenshots, the way you take slow breaths to keep from crying. I learned the keyboard shortcuts for recording your own screen without a mouse click. I forwarded myself emails from my personal account and saved attachments to a folder named Recipes. My mother had taught me to keep the good jewelry in a coffee can labeled flower. This felt like the same craft, translated. And then came the first raise. It arrived as a calendar invite titled Path Discussion, Compensation, at 7:30 p.m. on a Friday in a private dining room at a restaurant people said you needed a favor to get into. I declined, proposing a Monday afternoon in a conference room. He replied with a single word, "Dinner." I wrote back, "Not possible. Boundaries." My hand shook, but the period felt like a dot of paint you let dry. His response arrived 6 minutes later. "You're making this hard." I showed Elise the thread. She read it with her lips pressed together. "He'll escalate," she said. "HR won't," I started. "HR keeps their job by keeping his," she said, not unkindly. That night, I felt watched in my own apartment. The light from the street bled in around the blinds. My neighbor's music thumped like a slow heartbeat through the floor. I put my phone on the counter and covered its camera with a Post-it like a superstition. The lemon scent that had begun to cling to my clothes had followed me home and built a small, clean house in the back of my throat. On Monday, a performance note appeared in my file that I could only see because Elise whispered the path to where the system hid it. It cited difficulty taking direction and uncollegial tone. It had no author listed. The timestamp matched the hour I had declined the dinner. I printed the note. I highlighted the time. I slid it into a folder with a cracked spine. I labeled the folder Weather because that's what this was. Pressure dropping, wind turning, something big rolling in. Jonah asked me to grab a coffee at 3. I said yes, because saying yes to normal things felt like a way to keep the ground steady. He told me about his sister's kid and then offsite where a VP made a toast that made him want to throw his glass at the wall. When I told him, carefully, a version of what was happening, he went very still. "Do you want me to talk to him?" he asked. "I want the structure to work," I said. "I want the rules to matter." He rubbed his thumb along the seam of his cup. "Sometimes the only rule is who can smile longest. When the architecture of help leans toward the people who built it, where do you stand when it starts to fall?" The first twist wasn't that Victor wanted something I wouldn't give. It was that the people tasked with keeping him from wanting it had built stairs for him instead. I learned this in the HR director's office on a Wednesday that smelled like someone had just peeled an orange. Kara, all soft cardigans and harder eyes, offered me tea. Her office had 3 framed quotes about courage in tasteful fonts. "I want to file a formal complaint," I said. The word formal felt like a buckle snapping closed. I set a printed packet on her desk, dates, times, exact phrases. My hand brushed a small ceramic dish of paper clips. The metal clicked together, like teeth. Kara skimmed. She nodded at the right places. When she looked up, her smile was the same smile you give a person who's lost their change and doesn't know it yet. "We take these concerns very seriously," she said, "and Victor speaks very highly of you. That's not nothing." "I'm not asking for a compliment. I'm asking for a process." "Of course," she said quickly. "Process. We'll open an inquiry. I do want to note that dinners and off-site mentorship are common at your level. It's a gray area." "It's not a gray area if I've said no," I said. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back. "May I be honest with you?" she asked, lowering her voice like we were about to share a secret. "I've seen this before. It's better to reposition than to confront. We can move you to another principle. We can frame it as growth." "You're asking me to start over," I said. "I'm suggesting a path that doesn't put your future at risk," she said. And for a second, I saw a younger version of Kara in a mirror somewhere telling herself the same sentence. "It's not capitulation. It's navigation." "Will the note be removed from my file?" I asked. She blinked. "What note?" "The performance note from Friday," I said. She looked down at her screen. "I don't see—" She paused, then typed faster. That's internal calibration. It's not actionable. It's a story about me I didn't write." She smiled again, gentler, like I was a child angry at the weather. "Maya, we care about you here. Let us help you make the right move." On my walk back to my desk, I passed the glass wall of the boardroom. Victor stood at the head of the table, palms flat, talking with that measured, hungry calm he used when he needed a room to want something it didn't know it wanted yet. Kara stood at the far end, nodding. He turned his head and our gazes met through 2 panes of glass and a long table. He smiled like we'd just shared a joke. Elise found me an hour later in the copy room, where the hot, dusty breath of the machine made the air feel used. She shut the door and leaned back against it. Elise and Kara dated years ago, on and off. Don't put anything in her hands you can't afford to have on his desk in 5 minutes. I stared at her. The copier lit a bar of light across her face, then went dark. Somewhere, a stapler snicked twice. "How do you know?" I asked. "I'm the one who booked their flights," she said. The stairs Kara had built in her head were for herself once. Now she was asking me to climb them too. That night, I went home and put my phone face down on the table like it was a live wire. I sat on the floor and created a new email account with a dumb, forgettable name. I uploaded the first batch of screenshots and recordings, labeled them with times that had already happened. Then I wrote a list of names, women who had left HGV in the last 2 years after less than 18 months. I found 2 on LinkedIn and sent messages that felt like jumping from a moving car. "Hi, I don't know you. I work at HGV. I have a question about why you left. If you can't answer, I understand." One replied in 15 minutes. "I can't put it in writing, but I can meet. If the safety net is stitched by the same hands that pushed you, how do you fall without letting them decide how hard?" The first woman was named Priya, a former associate with bright eyes that dimmed only when she said the word offsite. We met at a donut shop that sold coffee in paper cups that went soft at the rim. She wore a navy blazer like a shield and held her cup with both hands. "I thought I was special," she said simply. "That's how they get you to walk into a trap smiling." He called it leadership grooming. The room had a view. The first time he brushed my wrist, I told myself I'd imagined it. The second time, I told him not to. Third time, I left and I was on a performance plan the next day. "HR?" I asked. Gave me an exit package with an NDA written in font so pretty it felt like it would be rude to argue, she said. "Why did you agree?" I asked, softer than the question deserved. She laughed into her cup. "Because I needed a job after. Because they were already calling references." When she left, she squeezed my hand, quick, like a relay passing a baton. "Get a lawyer before you get brave," she said. The second woman, Sophie, met me in Volunteer Park under a maple that dropped leaves big enough to be plates. She had the wary posture of a person who has learned to expect a camera in a flower. She didn't sit. She told me about a message he'd sent at 1:13 a.m., about a dinner that didn't end with dessert, about the way he'd smiled later when she cried in a conference room and told her she was being dramatic. She told me about Kara's gentle voice. She told me about the way the elevator felt slower the day she was escorted out. "I thought telling the truth would fix it," she said. "I learned that truth without leverage is confession." I went home and put the kettle on even though I wasn't going to drink the tea. The hiss steadied me. I texted Detective Ames, a number I'd gotten through a friend of a friend at a nonprofit that helped women who'd had enough. "If I brought you something, would you know what to do with it?" He replied, "Depends on the something, but probably." In the office, Victor continued to build his case that I was difficult. I started receiving calendar holds that never came with agendas. In stand-ups, he praised a junior man for work I stayed late to fix. He CC'd me on emails to Kara about my great raw talent that needs shaping. He called me kiddo once in a tone that made me want to scrub my skin. Jonah watched me one afternoon when we were both waiting for coffee to drip. "You're not sleeping," he said. "Congratulations, you can read faces." That, and you sent me a deck at 3:09 a.m. with a file name that looked like you'd smashed your forehead on the keyboard. I almost told him everything. His face made you want to trust gravity again. But I had learned the floor could tilt when you least expected it. "Have you ever thought of leaving?" I asked instead. He looked at the coffee as if it could answer. "I thought of staying and building a better floor." The next Friday, Victor called me into his office at 7:52 p.m. The floor was almost empty. The lemon smell felt stronger at night, like someone had spritzed success to make sure it didn't sleep. He gestured to the chair. I stood. "I'm concerned about your commitment," he said, steepling his fingers with a small show of sorrow. "My work is on time and accurate," I said. "We're not talking about tasks. We're talking about attitude." I heard Kara in his voice like a harmony. I took out my phone and set it on the desk in front of me, open to my calendar. Dinner is a no. Texting after 9 is a no. Touching is a no. Performance notes tied to me saying no are retaliation. That's a legal word. I'm using it on purpose. He leaned back. The leather made that soft animal sound again. "Be careful, Maya," he said lightly. "You're not the only one who can write a narrative." Is that a threat? It's a fact. And he smiled. I picked up my phone. My palms were damp. The room smelled like lemon and the last 3 men who had sat in that chair and said yes. I walked out and into the stairwell because the elevator suddenly felt like a mouth. On the stairs, my breath sounded too loud. The concrete was cool through my shoes. I sat and texted Priya. Lawyer recommendation. Then I texted the friend of a friend who had mentioned Detective Ames. I'm ready. The lawyer, Miss Chen, met me on a Sunday in an office that felt like a safe house. Plain carpet, a fern doing its best, a window that looked at ordinary sky. She read my packet. She told me what was civil and what might be criminal and what was brutal in its legality. We'll keep this out of HR for now. We go to the board's independent chair. We copy legal. We phrase it like a gift. We want to improve culture. And meanwhile, we build the record. How do I not get fired? I asked. You probably will, she said, kind as a doctor. I laughed because the alternative was crying. She slid me a tissue anyway. 2 days later, Victor sent me a calendar hold for mentorship for Seasons Bar. I declined. He replied with a thumbs up emoji that felt like a hand on the back of my neck. That was the night I pressed record before I walked into his office. That was the night he said the sentence about paths. That was the night I realized leverage sometimes sounds like your own voice coming back to you from a tiny speaker in a detective's palm. When the fire alarm is wired to the man with the lighter, who do you call before you smell smoke? There's a moment when the options in front of you are both bad, and you pick the one that leaves your name intact. Miss Chen laid it out for me on a yellow legal pad that smelled faintly of pencil shavings. Path A, internal complaint through HR, likely repositioning, silent exit, clean reference written by the man I was leaving because of. Path B, external report, risk of retaliation, public mess, other women finding me because I'd made myself findable. What do you want your life to look like in 6 months? She asked. I want to sleep without rehearsing conversations I didn't have, I said. I want to walk into a room and not calculate the angles. She nodded. Then B. I signed forms that made me feel like I was either brave or foolish or both. We sent a letter to the board's independent chair that did not use the words monster or ruined or afraid, though I thought them. It used dates. It used policies. It used the phrase quid pro quo, like a weight you place on a page to keep it from flying away. We copied a general counsel who had a reputation for preferring headlines that said swift action to ones that said cover up. We blind copied Detective Ames with the recording attached. Then I made a decision inside the decision. I would not meet Victor alone again. I would not close a door between us. I would not respond to any message after 9. I printed the policy that said I didn't have to and taped it inside my notebook like a talisman. The cost came fast. My calendar emptied of anything that mattered. A junior man was temporarily reassigned to Victor's projects. He became the person CC'd on threads I had started. An industry email blast went out announcing staff realignments that put me in the paragraph with the words support and back office. When I asked Elise how long the temporary would be, she met my eyes for one long second and then looked away. That evening, I boxed the personal items at my desk. The tiny jade plant, the photo of my mother holding a pie with the pride of a queen, the ceramic whale someone had left on the kitchen counter with a post-it that read, "Please adopt." The whale fit in my palm with a pleasing weight. I put it in last and closed the lid. On my way out, Jonah fell into step beside me under the awning. Rain stitched the air into fine lines. The sidewalk smelled like wet concrete and something fried. A bus sighed to a stop. Faces floated by in windows like fish in a lit tank. I went home and sat on the edge of my bed and felt the room tilt around the fulcrum of a choice that would not let me off easy. When you pick the hard right, how long do you hold your breath before the air changes? The unraveling began with a calendar invite I didn't accept and a hotel room I didn't enter. Investor dinner, private suite, the subject read, with a location that used a floor number instead of an address. I declined. Victor replied, "We'll talk when you're ready to be reasonable." I forwarded the exchange to Ms. Chen, who forwarded it to the general counsel with a sentence I wanted to frame. "This is precisely the behavior our client has documented." The board chair responded within a day. They were engaging independent counsel to review concerns raised. It sounded like someone turning a ship with a soup spoon. In the office, you could feel the hum change. People lowered their voices. Doors stayed slightly ajar, like a new etiquette had arrived. Then came the second twist. A plain manila envelope appeared on my apartment doormat with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper printed with a list of names and file numbers, labeled confidential settlements. There were dates, amounts, and initials. I recognized PS, SL, and a set of letters that made my stomach pitch. EM. Elise. I stared until the page blurred. Then I called Elise. We met at the bakery on the corner because it was loud and smelled like butter and sugar instead of lemon and law. She came in wearing the same calm and a sweater I'd seen 10 times. She held the sheet as if it might bite. "She signed because I wanted out," she said, her voice tight like a high wire. "He never touched me. He touched my life, my time, my sanity. When HR offered money to leave with a nice note, I took it. I hate that I took it. I also love my mortgage." "Did you put this on my mat?" I asked. She shook her head. "I wouldn't risk your case that way." She looked at me with something like awe and something like regret. "But someone wants you to keep going." 2 days later, a second envelope arrived. This one held a small black object, a thumb drive. I considered not touching it. Then I put it in an old laptop that didn't know my Wi-Fi and opened it like you open a door when you're sure a dog is behind it, but you're hoping it's friendly. It contained a security camera clip from a hotel hallway. The angle was low, near the carpet, as if the camera had been hidden in a rolling bag. The footage showed a door labeled 1904 opening, Victor stepping out, adjusting his cuffs, looking both ways. A woman I didn't know slipped out behind him, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. Victor placed a palm on the small of her back as if he were a door he was closing. The timestamp matched the night of a mentorship offsite from 3 months earlier. I slid the laptop away from me like it was hot. I emailed Ms. Chen. I texted Detective Ames. "You're gonna want this." That night, my phone lit with a new number. "You don't know me," the text said, "but I know what he did. He did it to me, too." The name that followed was Sabrina, a receptionist from 3 years ago. Then another message blinked on screen, from a different unknown number, and another. Each came like a wave catching me one step farther out from shore. The next morning, Victor stood behind me at the coffee machine and said in a voice warm enough to melt butter, "I'm disappointed, Maya." "I'm not entitled to your silence," I said. He chuckled. "Silence, no. I prefer music." He meant the music of people saying what he wanted them to say. At noon, security asked me for my badge. "Temporary," the guard said, eyes apologetic, "while IT does a thing." I handed it over. The lanyard felt empty around my neck, a ghost of belonging. By 3, a rumor had moved through the building that I'd stolen company documents. By 4, my access to email was under review. By 5, Ms. Chen had filed a retaliation claim so clean and sharp it could have been used to cut a cake. The board announced an independent investigation. Victor sent an all-staff email about how grateful he was for the chance to learn. I stared at the words until they turned into shapes and then back into words again. My skin crawled with the feeling you get when someone lies and expects you to decorate the lie with a bow. At 9 o'clock that night, a message pinged my secret email. "Meet me at the Four Seasons bar tomorrow at 7. I'll be wearing a green dress. Don't come alone." The sender was anonymous. The subject line read, "Video." I sent the screenshot to Miss Chen and Detective Ames. Miss Chen replied, "Do not meet alone. We'll have eyes in the room." Detective Ames, "I'll be there before you. Sit where you can see the door." When I closed my laptop, my apartment sounded too quiet. I lay on the rug and watched the ceiling fan unspool the air. I pressed my palm to my chest and felt my heart beat like a fist against a door. When truth starts arriving faster than you can carry it, how do you keep from dropping your own name? The Four Seasons bar smelled like citrus and old wood, and the kind of money that doesn't carry a wallet. The lighting did flattering things to faces. The ice in the glasses sounded like careful decisions. I sat at a small table that wobbled in a way that made me want to fix it with a sugar packet. At 6:59 p.m., a woman in a green dress slid onto the stool 2 down from me. She didn't look at me. She ordered sparkling water in a voice that trembled only once. She took out her phone and placed it face down. In the mirror behind the bar, I watched Detective Ames take a seat where he could see both exits and the reflection of the door. Miss Chen texted, "We've got you." At 7:03, Victor walked in. He didn't look around. Men like him assume rooms arrange themselves. He spoke to the host, then to the bartender, then turned as if drawn by a string. His gaze passed over the woman in green as if she were a painting he didn't have time for. It landed on me. "Good," he said, like I'd kept an appointment. "You've decided to be reasonable." "I'm here to listen," I said. "Listening is a promotion," he said, amused. He glanced at the woman in green and then back at me. "Let's not make a scene." He suggested a private suite. I suggested staying where the ice could hear us. He smiled, that tight smile men use when they forget which mask they've put on. He leaned in, and I caught the peppery, hungry cologne. "You've made mistakes," he said. "I can protect you from them." "You're offering protection from you," I said. "From outcomes," he corrected. He slid a small folded paper toward me, a new offer, numbers that would have made a different version of me dizzy. "You'll sign a standard document, mutual respect, mutual silence. We'll call it repositioning." Behind him, the woman in green lifted her sparkling water and touched the rim to her bottom lip without drinking. In the mirror, I saw her eyes. They were the eyes of a person trying to be a witness to her own life. What about the others? Priya, Sophie, Elise, Sabrina. He blinked, just once. He said, "History." "And the hotel," I said. "Room 1904? Something inside his face hardened a half shade. "Careful, Maya," he said. "There are laws about defamation. There are laws about everything I've documented." And my voice didn't shake. In my bag, the small recorder Ms. Chen had given me hummed its quiet, obedient hum. He leaned closer. "No one will believe you if I decide they shouldn't." In the mirror, the woman in green flinched like the word had touched her back. Detective Ames stood. He smoothed his jacket like an apology. Two other people I hadn't noticed earlier, one by the host stand, one by the hallway, shifted their weight. "Mr. Hale," Ames said, polite, almost bored. "We'd like a word." Victor smiled at him, the way you smile at a valet who says the car isn't ready. "Of course, officer. Always happy to cooperate." "Detective," Ames corrected gently. "We're executing a warrant for devices and records related to an ongoing investigation." Victor laughed. "You can't take my phone?" "We can," Ames said, and held out his hand. Victor's eyes flicked to me, then to the woman in green, then to the exits like he was reading a map no one else could see. He placed the phone in Ames' palm with theatrical calm. "You're making a mistake," he said, but it sounded like a line he'd practiced and now didn't believe. The woman in green stood, quietly, as if she were excusing herself to the restroom. She passed me without a glance. As she reached the door, she paused and set a small, flat envelope on the host stand. The host blinked at it like it had materialized. On the outside, in neat block letters, was written, "For the record." Ames nodded at a colleague, who retrieved the envelope with tongs like it was fragile. Victor watched, amused at first, then not. "Mr. Hale," Ames said, lowering his voice, but not enough that I couldn't hear it. "We have video from hotel security, statements from multiple former employees, and a recording you made for us just now." Victor turned to me, something finally naked in his eyes. "You set me up," he said, but he meant, "You didn't play. I told you my boundaries. You pushed." The next moments were fast and slow at once. A manager appeared with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The bar sound changed, quieter, then noisier again, like a wave. Someone placed a gentle hand on my elbow. Ms. Chen's voice in my ear, "Breathe, and don't talk." The woman in green walked into the hallway and disappeared like a good ghost. Outside, the air felt washed. Sirens stitched the distance. The hotel awning glowed the color of expensive honey. I stood beneath it and realized my hands were steady. Victor walked out between two detectives, not cuffed yet, but contained in a way that I had not seen before. He glanced at me as if I were an equation he had miscalculated by a decimal place. "You'll regret this," he said softly. I thought of the jade plant on my desk, the ceramic whale, my mother's pie, the lemon smell that had colonized my clothes. I spent my regret on months when I didn't speak. When the tide finally turns, what do you do with all the air you were saving? The company sent an all-staff email the next day announcing that Victor was stepping aside pending the outcome of an independent review. The press release used a photo of him looking into middle distance as if he were thinking noble thoughts about innovation. It did not use the words investigation or multiple women or pattern. My name did not appear. That was good. And it stung. HR offered to support my transition with a package I forwarded to Ms. Chen without opening. The board's independent chair asked to meet me in a conference room that smelled like new carpet and old decisions. She was a small woman with a precise haircut and a pen that clicked once before every sentence. "We failed you," she said. "I can't undo that, but I intend to fix what can be fixed." I said, "Start with the people, not the optics." They hired an outside firm. They interviewed everyone, even the security guards who had learned the exact degree the executive doors closed. Names appeared. Patterns etched themselves into memos like frost. Victor's devices told their own stories. The hotel video joined them. The woman in green sent her own lawyered letter. Sabrina, Priya, Sophie, Elise, others. We were a constellation, suddenly visible because someone turned off the glamour lights. I was put on paid leave for my own protection, which is what they call the pause between the end of your old life and the start of whatever's next. I slept for 12 hours at a time for 3 days and then woke to a clean hunger. I ran in the rain until my shoes squelched. I learned how quiet my apartment could be when fear wasn't doing the decorating. Victor resigned, not because of me, the press would say, but because of personal reasons that everyone could smell. Kara took a leave of absence that turned permanent. The general counsel sent me a letter that used the words apologize and commitment and cultural change and enclosed a check that was both too much and not nearly enough. I didn't go back. I took a job at a nonprofit 2 bus lines away that helps people document workplace abuse into something courts respect. The office smelled like burnt coffee and hope. We didn't have lemon cleaner, we had Lysol. The chairs wobbled, the window stuck. It felt like a place where truth might not need a bow to be let in. Elise found a role at a startup with a woman CEO who, in our first meeting, asked me what I needed to do my best work and then handed me a budget. Priya sent me a photo of the mountain she'd climbed in Montana with a caption that said, "I didn't think heights would feel like this." Jonah texted me on it Tuesday to say he'd stayed and was building a better floor. I believed him. On a Sunday, I took the ceramic whale down from my shelf, washed the dust from its back, and set it beside my sink. I liked seeing it there. A small, improbable survivor. What do you call the moment you stop living in reaction to a man and start living in response to yourself? I think the word is room. I used to think safety was the right keycard and the right heels, the ability to read a room and become what it wanted until it gave you what you needed. I know better now. Safety is a boundary you can say out loud while you look a person in the eye. It's a record you keep when you are being told to forget. It's the choice to name a thing without apologizing for the noise it makes. People will call what I did brave because that lets them keep their distance. It was not brave. It was arithmetic. The cost of silence had outgrown my salary. The interest was compounding. I paid the fee to exit the loan. I think about the woman in the green dress sometimes, how she steadied her glass and steadied the room, how she left without taking a bow because we don't give yourself applause for not drowning. I think about Elisa's steady hands, Priya's laugh that finally reached her eyes, Sophie's back upright under the maple. I think about the way the lemon scent left my clothes one wash at a time. I still carry the recorder sometimes when I walk home late, not because I plan to use it, but because it reminds me that truth can be portable. I still love a clean calendar, a solved logistics knot, a sentence that lands. I love them more now that I don't use them to distract myself from what hurts. If I could tell my first day self one thing, it would be this. Your name is not a door that opens when someone stronger knocks. It's the lock you choose. I didn't burn my life down. I opened a window and let the smoke out. And in the clearer air, I could finally hear my own voice and believe it.